Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. No breaking news, no creepy legends, no top 10 lists. Just you, me, a quiet story pulled from the edge of memory, and the kind of life advice you only get from someone who's lived long enough to forget why they started counting in the first place. It all starts with a breeze, a quiet room, and a box that probably shouldn't have been opened. You probably won't survive this story. Okay, technically yes, you will, but you might come out of it craving dust, forgotten letters, and unsolicited advice from a very old lady. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you are. Let's see who's up with us tonight now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk slowly into the attic you haven't touched in years. It smells like old wood, stale dust, and something else. Maybe rain that hasn't arrived yet. Could be the weather or your mind pulling you into something older than the furniture around you. You're not looking for anything in particular. Sometimes on nights like this, you just open a door and let yourself drift. And right there, in the middle of the messled clothes, boxers you swore you already threw out to see it. A metal tin, faded silver, quiet, like it's been waiting. On the lid, a purple circle drawn in thick, steady strokes like someone who wrote too much by hand for too many years. Inside, letters, about 10, folded neatly and tied with string as thin as hair. The top one has handwriting like it's balancing on the edge of age to me. In the future, in case I forget, your great-grandmother's writing. She lived to 92, tiny, woman, sharp tongue, soft voice. She once told you, you don't need to understand everything to live well. But you do need to remember enough not to repeat the same stupid things again. You smile. Classic her, gentle with a bite. She never had to raise her voice to make people listen. You sit on the dusty floor, back against the wall, letter in hand. Outside, wind brushes against the window, like it's reading with you. The first letter opens with, if you're reading this, either you're too curious for your own good, or you're about to throw away my stuff. Either way, that's fine. But before you do anything, sit down. There are things I think very few people know, and almost nobody believes. But truth doesn't need to scream to be real. You almost hear her voice in your head, calm, mused, like she's about to say something that might sound weird, but ends up making too much sense. She writes about 1943, when she was just 10, and how the neighbor woman told her, never kiss someone on a foggy morning. Fog carries the memories of the dead, the woman said. You shiver. Not because you're scared, but because there's something about childhood superstitions that feel older than time, not yours, but oddly familiar. Then she adds, I've learned that every superstition starts with a slice of truth. People don't invent nonsense just to pass time, they create it to explain the fears they can't name. That line stops you, because it's true. Like how you feared monsters under the bed as a kid, not because they were real, but because you needed something to call the dark. The letter continues with a daily ritual she swore by. Every morning, she'd speak out loud 3 things she was grateful for, even if no one was around, not for others to hear. For me to remember I still had something worth keeping. Funny enough, a 1950s study once claimed that people who practiced daily gratitude lived an average of 7 years longer. Experts still debate whether that's due to biology or psychology, but either way, that's not nothing. You remember how you used to set your alarm 10 minutes early, just to lie in bed and think about something to look forward to. That small ritual helped pull you through some tough days. Gratitude does that, quiet, like a secret handshake between you and life. Then she drops this random little gem. Did you know people used to write love letters with beet juice? Ink was expensive. Love wasn't. You laugh. That's exactly the kind of thing she'd say, ridiculous and poetic all at once. You look around the attic. Everything here suddenly feels like a breadcrumb trail. That old pillow, the busted radio, even the torn photo with half a smile left. You start to wonder how many stories are sleeping inside things like these. How many pieces of advice are just waiting for someone to listen. And just like that, you remember her sitting on the porch, chipped teacup in hand, wind teasing her gray curls, her eyes closed like she was listening to something far away. She never needed an audience, only time and, maybe one curious great-grandkid to listen years later. The letter ends with a whisper. If you're still reading, It means you're patient enough to know not everything has to be true for it to matter. Sometimes, being true for someone is enough. You hold the letter like it's more than paper, like it's a map not to somewhere new, but to something forgotten. Outside, the wind picks up just a little, and in that hush, you can almost hear her say, "There's more, sweetheart, don't go anywhere." The second letter is thinner, almost fragile to the touch. The fold creases have softened over time, like even paper gets tired of waiting. You untie the string, slow and careful, like you're diffusing something sacred. Let's talk about the day I stopped trusting calendars. That's how it begins. No hello, no context, just a sentence that drops like a marble in still water. Your great-grandmother writes about a spring morning in 1957. She was 24. The newspaper said it was Tuesday, April 9th, but to her, it was the day a man arrived, with a suitcase and a smile that didn't quite match his shoes. The man was a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman, the kind you don't really see anymore. Clean hands, confident pitch, and eyes that scanned every corner of the room, like he was counting exits. She didn't buy the books, but she remembered his advice free of charge. The best time to change your life is the day before everyone expects you to. At first, it sounds like a sales trick, but you sit with that line, roll it around in your head like a hard candy, and you realize some truths don't show up wearing name tags. They sneak in sideways, dressed like strangers. That same year, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite. For a few hours, Earth was no longer alone in the sky. A man-made object was up there, blinking silently. In orbit, people panicked. Churches held prayer services. Radios buzzed with static and speculation. But what most folks don't know is this. Sputnik didn't just launch the space race. It crashed the sleep of an entire generation. You can imagine it lying awake at night, staring out your window, wondering if that tiny blinking dot meant your childhood was officially over. "We thought we'd just learned to live with telephones," she writes, and suddenly the sky was wired. Experts still debate whether the psychological impact of Sputnik was greater than its technological one. Was it the engineering marvel or the existential slap that changed everything? The letter continues with a reflection. The day the world changed, nothing in my kitchen did. The teapot still whistled. My socks still had holes. But I remember feeling like I'd accidentally stepped into someone else's future. You know that feeling. Like you're living in a moment you didn't sign up for. A glitch in your timeline. You nod, even though no one's watching. She goes on to say she stopped writing dates on her letters after that. Said calendars made people lazy. We trust the box on the wall more than our own instinct. So she measured time in other ways. The number of sunrises after a heartbreak. How many cups of tea it took to forgive someone. Whether the bread rose properly that day. It sounds strange until you realize you do it too. You remember years by what phone you had, or the smell of your ex's car, or how loud the world felt before your first real failure. The letter breaks into smaller observations, almost like a list, but messier. Everyone looks up at the moon. Almost no one notices if it's waxing or waning. People lie more often when they're wearing new shoes. A sandwich tastes better when you eat it sitting on stairs. You laugh, and then you stop. Because wait, that last one, kinda true. She writes, I don't trust calendars, but I trust the wind. I trust the pause in a sentence. I trust that look people give when they're about to lie but hope you won't catch it. That line sticks. Because you've seen it, haven't you? That flicker in the eyes, the almost smile, the inhale before the fiction begins. You've probably done it. To dot your fingers, trace the edge of the letter. It's short, less than a page and a half, but it lingers. You imagine her at the table, pen in hand, writing this, not to be wise but to make sense of something that still didn't. You'll want to mark the big days, births, weddings, tragedies, but don't forget the almost days, the days when nothing happened, but you almost changed everything. Those are the ones that haunt you. You pause. What were your almost days? The job you didn't apply for. The text you deleted. The time you almost said I love you, and instead changed the subject to pizza. The second letter ends without a goodbye, just a single sentence. Keep the fan on low tonight. The wind might carry something you need to hear. You glance at the old box. There are still more letters, waiting. Outside. The wind sighs, not loud, just enough, like a memory, shuffling its feet. And for a second, you think maybe she's right. The third letter smells faintly like lavender. Not the artificial kind pumped into candles, but the old world scent of a drawer that hasn't been opened since disco was a thing. You hold it to your nose for a moment, and it reminds you of Sunday afternoons, visiting her house, where time seemed to slow down on purpose. You unfold the paper. It's thicker than the last, more worn. The edges are curled like they were nervously handled, over and over. Maybe this one meant something deeper to her. The first time I was ever truly angry. I was 13, she writes, and it wasn't at a person, it was at a statue. That's how she opens. No context, just the line that catches you off guard. She tells the story of a school field trip to Washington, D.C. The class was supposed to be in awe. The monuments, the flags, the granite soaked in history. But she wasn't in awe. She was furious. Everyone kept pointing at statues of men who made America great. But not one of those men ever washed their own socks. You laugh, and then you stop because, again, she's kind of right. She wasn't just being sassy. She was making a point. That people, especially women, especially poor folks, rarely get remembered unless they cause trouble or wear crowns. No, one builds statues for the women who worked double shifts and didn't slap their bosses. No one carves stone for the janitors who raised good kids. She stared at one statue so long the teacher thought she was praying. I wasn't. I was promising myself that I'd never pretend someone was great just because history said so. The year was 1963. You remember the textbooks mentioning that Martin Luther King's March on Washington, the I Have a Dream speech. That moment is locked into American memory. But what most people don't know, the sound system that day almost didn't work. The microphones glitched. There were backup plans to move the crowd, and at one point, King considered shortening his speech, but Mahalia Jackson was behind him, whispering, "Tell them about the dream, Martin," and he listened. It gives you chills, because one woman's quiet voice might have saved the most quoted moment in modern American history, and she doesn't have a monument. She writes, "I remember watching the march on TV and crying. Not because I understood every word, but because I finally saw someone whose anger looked like mine, calm, focused, and heavy like stone." Then comes one of her weird facts. You've learned to expect them by now. Did you know there's a tree in California older than the pyramids, over 4,800 years, and it's never asked for a statue? You pause, because maybe greatness isn't in being remembered. Maybe it's in persisting, quietly, whether anyone notices or not. Experts still argue over how to define historical significance. Some say it's impact, others say it's legacy. But your great-grandmother had her own definition. If you can help one person stand taller without needing them to kneel first, you've already changed the world. You feel that one? Deep. She recounts how, in her 20s, she worked as a cleaner for a small-town law firm. The lawyers never remembered her name, but the receptionist always left a cookie at her desk. That cookie meant more to me than any check I cashed. Years later, she ran into the receptionist again, this time at a grocery store. The woman didn't remember her. That's how kindness works. It's often unmemorable to the giver and unforgettable to the receiver. Your breath catches a little. You think back to moments you didn't realize mattered until years later. A stranger who complimented your laugh. A teacher who let you sit in silence instead of forcing words out of you. A cashier who waited an extra beat before asking how your day was going, like they actually wanted an answer. History remembers noise, she writes, but healing often comes in whispers. There's a break in the page, a faint smudge like her hand hesitated. Then softly, "I wasn't mad at the statue because it was made of stone. I was mad because I knew I'd never see one of me." You don't know whether to cry or smile. So you do neither. You just sit there, holding the letter, listening to the attic creak gently, like even the floorboards are thinking it over. Then, the last line, "Next time you see a statue, don't look up, look around. That's where the real stories are." You nod to yourself, and for a moment, you wonder how many statues you've passed without realizing you were supposed to be the one carving. The fourth letter is tucked inside a folded linen napkin, frayed at the corners, yellowed like it once knew better days. It smells faintly of lemon and something like old lipstick. You unfold it with care, and a single dried daisy falls into your lap. Your hands pause. That daisy doesn't just feel like decoration, it feels like a memory she wanted you to catch. "I almost married a man named Ray," she starts, But then he did the unforgivable. He tried to explain jazz to me. You chuckle. Of course, she'd start a love story like that. She tells you about 1949. She was 18, and Ray was older, polite, handsome, smelled like shoe polish and ambition. He said things like, "You'd look even prettier if you smiled more. And trust me, I know how the world works." The thing about Ray, she writes, was that he knew everything except how to sit in silence. He took her to a dance, not one of those stiff suit affairs, but a sweaty summer night with a local band. Real horns, and couples spinning in shoes that didn't match. Midway through the night, a trumpet player stepped into the spotlight and let out a solo that split the air like thunder wrapped in velvet. She stopped mid-step. Ray didn't notice. I said, "Did you hear that?" And he said, "Yeah, I've studied jazz, it's all based on math." And just like that, he was gone. You shouldn't need a calculator to feel something. She tells you about how that night changed her, not just the date, but the decision. She realized she didn't want a man who explained things. She wanted one who noticed them, who knew when to shut up and let the world play its solo. That same year, something else big happened. The first Polaroid camera was sold to the public. Instant photos, a miracle. What most people don't realize. The woman behind it, the one who helped invent the chemical process, never got credit until decades later. Her name was Maru Morse. She didn't complain. She kept working. Some people build flash, others develop slowly in the dark. You think about that, how some people bloom like fireworks. Others, like film, need time, quiet, patience. They're not broken, just not instant. Experts still debate whether instant photography was a gimmick or a genius pivot, but it changed how people remembered. Suddenly, memories were no longer hazy or hopeful. They were printed, held, sometimes overexposed, sometimes perfect by accident. Your great-grandmother continues, "I didn't want my life to be perfectly posed. I wanted it blurry, a little crooked, and full of noise." That's when she met someone else. Not a man in a suit, but a busboy who danced when no one was watching. They never dated. She never even learned his last name. But he did something Ray never did. He noticed when I was quiet. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just put a daisy in my hair and said, "The song's still playing." You looked down at the daisy. She pressed into the letter. That moment, she kept it. Not because it led to anything, but because it meant something. She writes, "People always think a good story ends in marriage or heartbreak, but most just end in a song you didn't want to stop dancing to." You pause, letting that one settle. Then comes the weird fact. You've come to expect them. Did you know that heartbeats sync up when people dance closely? Scientists measured it. Strangers can match rhythm without even realizing. That's not just biology, that's poetry hiding in a lab coat. She closes the letter with this: "Don't marry someone who knows the answers. Love someone who knows how to ask the right questions and when to say nothing at all." The napkin falls gently in your lap again. You refold it. Not like trash, but like a keepsake, because maybe that's what it is now. You glance at the box. The letters aren't in order, they're not dated, but somehow, they still flow. Like jazz. You think about Ray, wonder if he ever stopped talking. Then again, maybe he married someone who liked math in their music. You don't judge, but you do smile. Somewhere, the trumpet solo is still ringing. This one isn't even folded. It's crumpled, like it was stuffed into the box mid-thought, maybe in a moment of frustration or urgency. The ink is a little smudged, like maybe she cried while writing it, or sneezed. With her, honestly, either is possible. At the top of the page, in her slanted, looping hand, it reads, "The problem with being right is you're often alone." Yeah, this is going to be that kind of letter. She starts by telling you about her sister, Moth, older by 3 years, quicker with a smile, and even quicker with a slap if you borrowed her lipstick without asking. They hadn't spoken for a full year in 1971. Why? Because of a dinner party and a disagreement over which president had the best hair. Yes, seriously, we fought over things that didn't matter, she writes, but the silence that followed felt like it was carved in stone. And it's funny because 1971 was also the year Intel released the world's first microprocessor, a little chip that could fit in your palm and would go on to power everything from watches to rockets, a spark that would eventually give birth to the entire digital age. But here's what they don't teach you in tech history class. The original idea for the microprocessor came from a place of miscommunication. Engineers trying to fix one thing accidentally built something for everything. So, yeah, silence has power. Sometimes it builds bridges. Other times it builds machines that will eventually judge your taste in music via algorithm. Experts still argue whether the digital age made us smarter, she writes, but no one debates that it made us louder. And maybe that's what this letter is about. The noise, the temptation to be right, to win, to have the final word, whether it's an argument or a tweet. She tells you how Martha eventually came over one night, unannounced, no makeup, hair in rollers, holding a Tupperware container of mashed potatoes. Neither of us said sorry, we just ate, and that was enough. You get that? Sometimes the truth isn't in the words, it's in the mashed potatoes, she goes on. Being right is addictive. You get high off the moral victory, but you wake up alone. It stings a little, doesn't it? Because you've been there, arguing in the comments, holding on to grudges like they're savings bonds, getting ready to pounce on someone's wrong opinion like a cat with a superiority complex. She warns you about it, not in a scolding way, but in that I've tripped on this rock before kind of way. You don't have to lose your fire, she writes. Just make sure it's keeping people warm, not burning bridges. Then she drops a weird fact. Right on schedule. You know flamingos are born gray, right? It's the food they eat that turns them pink. Even birds change with what they digest. She lets that hang in the air, because what are you feeding yourself every day? What ideas, what headlines, what conversations are you swallowing whole, without tasting? She recalls a woman at her church, Miss Eleanor, who never raised her voice, but could silence an entire room with one eyebrow. She once told me, you can be right, or you can be kind. The secret is knowing when to pick which. You reread that twice, because there's someone in your life, right now, probably more than one, where that line applies. Someone you've been right against for so long, you forgot what you were even arguing about. She ends the letter with a quieter tone. When I die, I don't want people to say I was always right. I want them to say I made space, that I left the door open, even when I had every reason to lock it. You fold the crumpled paper gently. Smooth out the creases. Not because it matters to the letter, but because it matters to you. A breeze stirs in the attic. The fan hums softly. Somewhere downstairs, maybe the fridge kicks on, or maybe it's your heartbeat, reminding you to let something go. Maybe this is the letter you needed most. This letter has a grease stain on one corner and a doodle of a chicken wearing glasses in the margin. You smile before even reading it. Already know this one's going to be different. She begins with no preamble, no hello, just, the best meal I ever had was in a gas station. Well, here we go. She writes about a summer road trip in 1955 with two friends, no air conditioning, and a car radio that only worked when you hit the dashboard just right. They were somewhere in Kansas, or maybe Missouri-ish, couldn't remember exactly, because back then maps were folded and friendships were unbreakable. We were starving. Pulled into a gas station where the bathroom key was attached to a wrench, that kind of place. Inside, behind the register, was a woman named Odessa. Hair in curlers, face like she'd seen too much nonsense to be impressed by anything short of Jesus himself showing up for a Coke. She took one look at us and said, "You girls need fried chicken." And she was right. No menu, no prices, just 3 foil-wrapped miracles, 2 bottles of pop, and a slice of peach pie that was still warm. They ate on the hood of the car while the sun dropped behind a grain silo. We didn't speak for 10 whole minutes. Not out of politeness, just reverence. You picture it, the dust, the laughter, that kind of hunger you don't get from skipping lunch but from being young, lost, and free. That same year, something else was quietly cooking in the background of history. Disneyland opened its gates for the first time, July 17, 1955. What most people don't know. The opening was a disaster. Asphalt was still drying. Rides broke down. Food ran out. People fainted from the heat. But you know what, she writes. People remember the magic, not the mess. Experts still argue if Disneyland's launch was a PR failure or a masterclass in optimism. But the takeaway, you don't need everything to be perfect. You just need people to believe it could be. She ties it back to Odessa. That chicken wasn't perfect. The crust was a little too thick, and the pie was probably from a can, but that woman fed us like we were family. And that's the real flavor. She writes. too many. Folks chase fancy. They want restaurants with wait lists and food that looks like it belongs in a museum. But let me tell you, flavor doesn't live in approval. It lives in the grease, the grin, and the girl behind the counter who says, "You look like you need this." Then comes the fact you didn't expect. You know, the best before date on most foods isn't actually when it expires. It's just when the company suggests you eat it. By half the time, it's still fine. Her point: the world is full of expiration dates on beauty, success, love, joy, most of them total nonsense. You let that settle. How many things have you thrown out too soon? Dreams, ideas, people, yourself, maybe. She recounts one more moment. Years later, after her first divorce. Wait, first, she was driving alone, crying, unsure what to do next. She pulled into a diner. No plans, just instinct. The waitress brought me soup I didn't ask for. Said, "You look like you need broth." I tipped her more than the bill. That's the through line in all her stories. The small kindnesses, the unexpected warmth, the little, greasy, glorious acts of grace. She signs this one a little differently. If you're ever driving through nowhere, stop for pie. And if the woman behind the counter calls you honey, you're exactly where you need to be. You fold the letter with a smile that lingers even after it's tucked away. The attic feels warmer now, or maybe it's you, somewhere out there. Odessa probably never knew she fed a memory that would last a lifetime. And somewhere in you, there's a craving not just for fried chicken, but for meaning. For those moments that come without warning and leave you full in a way no recipe can explain. This letter is different. It's written on the back of a bingo card. Number squares faded. A faint red lipstick kiss pressed right across the B column, as if to say, "Yes, darling. Even chance can be charming." She starts without hesitation. "I once lost $50 and found myself, well now." That's not something you hear every day. She tells the story of a night in 1964. A storm rolling in. She was newly married, second time living in a tiny apartment above a barbershop that smelled of talcum powder and crushed dreams. Money was tight, nerves were tighter, and her new husband had just told her he didn't think women should handle finances. So, naturally, I went straight to the bingo hall. It was a rebellion, yes, but a gentle one. A stormy Thursday, a coat too thin for the weather, and 20 crumpled dollars from a cookie jar she wasn't supposed to open. I sat next to a woman named Laverne who wore 5 rings and drank coffee like it owed her rent. The game was electric, not glamorous, but charged. Like everyone there knew they were just one number away from groceries or rent or something to finally brag about. She lost every round by the end of the night. I was down 50 and up one. Epiphany. I didn't need anyone's permission to take risks, only my own. Meanwhile, 1964 was a big year for another kind of gamble. IBM introduced the System 360, a family of computers that would revolutionize how businesses operated and how we thought about processing power. What most folks don't know, the engineers had to bet their careers on a system that hadn't even been built yet. They designed it on paper, hoped it'd work in real life. Talk about bingo. Experts still debate if it was genius or luck, but without that risk, we wouldn't have modern computing. People think life's about strategy, she writes, but most of it's just showing up and saying B12 with confidence. She shifts to something quieter. The same night, walking home in the rain, her coat soaked through and no umbrella, she passed a man on the corner handing out flyers. He offered her one. She waved him off, but he said, "Ma'am, this one's not about Jesus, it's about jazz." And I took it. It was for a small show, down the block. She almost didn't go, but her shoes were already ruined, and what was one more detour? That jazz trio, they didn't save my life, but they reminded me I had one. She writes that it's dangerous to live by balance sheets and predictability, that sometimes losing money or a bet or a plan is the price of rediscovering yourself. And then, as always, the unexpected fact. Statistically, you're more likely to win at bingo than to find your soulmate. And yet, people still fall in love every day. She lets that linger like smoke. We gamble on love, on jobs, on calling someone first, and half the time we lose. But the real win, it's that you dared to play. You realize she's not just talking about bingo anymore. She closes with, "I never did tell that husband I spent the cookie jar money. He thought I bought new curtains. But what I bought was courage and I used it every damn day after." You fold the bingo card gently. careful not to smudge the lipstick. She didn't win that night, but she gained something better, and somewhere in your chest, you feel it, the tickle of a risk you've been too afraid to take. Maybe this is your permission slip. Maybe the universe is whispering, go on, say B12. This one is written on hotel stationery, the Marigolden Room, 206 inches printed in faded gold at the top. There's a coffee ring over the date, and a tiny sketch of a rotary phone in the corner. Like she was waiting on a call that never came. She starts with, loneliness isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of being understood. You feel that one, in your ribs. She tells you about a business trip to Chicago, in the winter of 1978. She was 45. Single again, third time's the charm, except when it isn't, and sent to pitch a marketing idea to a room full of men who couldn't pronounce her name right despite it being 4 letters. I wore a gray suit that made me look like a banker's ghost. I thought if I blended in, they'd listen. They didn't. She describes sitting in that hotel room afterward, heater clicking like it had opinions, snow piling on the cylinder, wondering what the hell she was doing, why she kept chasing rooms that didn't want her in them. It wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't failure. It was invisibility that undid me. That same year, a satellite named IC-3 was launched into space to study solar winds and magnetic fields. It would end up drifting far beyond its planned mission, forgotten for decades. What's wild? In 2014, a group of amateur scientists re-established contact with it, literally called it on the right frequency, and the old satellite answered. All that time, she writes, and it was still listening, still out there, still willing to speak when someone finally spoke its language. Experts are still baffled how that ancient satellite powered back on. But it proved something beautiful. Even when you feel forgotten, you're not broken. Maybe you're just waiting to be found by the right frequency. Back in the hotel, she ordered room service, French toast and tomato juice, a weird combo, but she needed something warm and something sharp. She called her friend, got back home, even though it was late. I didn't say anything profound. I just said, I bombed. Dot said, yeah, but at least you got out there, and I cried into my toast. You smile. Because sometimes the best support group is one woman and a breakfast food. She continues, loneliness isn't cured by crowds. It's cured by contact. Real contact. Someone who sees you, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Then she hits you with a strange fact. Did you know octopuses have neurons in their arms? They literally feel the world before their brain does. She lets that metaphor sink in. We're all just reaching out, hoping to touch something that says, you make sense, you're not crazy, I see you. She says she started writing postcards to herself after that trip. No deep quotes, just things like, today sucked, but you wore the hell out of those shoes. Or, keep going, something weird and wonderful is coming. I still have a box of them, she writes. Proof that even when no one else cheered for me, I clapped. Anyway, you picture that box. The small, stubborn hope of it, like planting a tree in a parking lot. She signs off with, if you're lonely right now, write to yourself, say something kind, say something dumb. Just don't let the silence have the last word. You put the hotel stationery back in the pile. There's something in your chest now, a soft ache, but not a sad one. More like permission to be alone, but not invisible. To reach, like the satellite, or the octopus, or the woman eating toast in room 206. You are still broadcasting. Someone will hear you. This letter is scribbled on the back of an old receipt. $3.75 for coffee and a slice of lemon pie. Dated 1983. The ink is faded, the edges crinkled, and there's a sugar packet taped to the top. You get the sense she didn't just write this. She meant it to be found one day. She opens strong. Let me tell you something most people get wrong. Closure is a myth. You pause. That's not what they teach in movies. Or therapy pamphlets. Or internet advice columns with too many HTAGS. She continues. The truth is, some doors don't close. You just stop knocking. She tells you about a man named Ray. Not a great love, she writes, but a loud one. The kind of man who quoted poetry badly and disappeared for days with no explanation. He once gave her a rock he found on a hike and called it a symbol of permanence. 2 weeks later, he left a note on a napkin and never came back. For years, I kept the rock. Like it meant something. Like he meant something. You picture her brushing dust off that silly stone, long after Ray had become someone else's problem. That same year, 1983, Motorola released the first commercial mobile phone, the Dyna TC800X. It was bulky, heavy, and cost nearly $4,000, but it changed the world. What most people don't know, the battery lasted only 30 minutes. You had to charge it for 10 hours. That's love, isn't it? Big promises and poor endurance. Experts still argue whether that first mobile phone was genius or gimmick, but it redefined connection. Suddenly, we didn't have to wait by the phone. We carried it with us. And yet, she writes, people still vanish, still ghost, still say, I'll call you, and never do. She talks about waiting, the curse of the maybe, checking messages, rereading texts, imagining what you could have said differently. But the hardest thing, realizing you won't get the apology, the closure, the grand explanation. She doesn't sugarcoat it. Some people leave you unread for the rest of your life. Then she hits you with this odd but perfect fact. There's a species of jellyfish that can technically live forever, Torotopsis dorni. When it's injured or stressed, it reverts to its earlier state and starts over. Again and again. She lets that sit a moment. If a jellyfish can start over, so can you. And you don't even need to live underwater. She says she eventually threw the rock into the ocean. I imagined it skipping once, then sinking into silence. Like Ray's promises, it didn't need a speech. It just needed to be gone. Then comes the line that cuts clean. Closure doesn't come when the door shuts. It comes when you stop trying to explain why it stayed open so long. You sit with that dot because maybe you've got your own version of the rock. Maybe it's a letter, a playlist, a voicemail you still haven't deleted. Or worse, a question you ask yourself at 2 a.m. and pretend not to hear in daylight. She wraps the letter by saying, don't wait for someone to come back and tell you why it ended. You already know. Or maybe you don't. Doesn't matter. That's not the point. You flip over the receipt. The back just says, you paid for the pie. That's all you owe. You laugh out loud this time, because that kind of wisdom is like lemon pie, sharp, sweet, and a little messy if you're not paying attention. You put the sugar packet back in place, like a bookmark, and maybe tonight, you finally stop knocking on that old door in your head. This one's written on the inside of a cereal box. Yup, folded flat, brown cardboard still dusted with tiny crumbs. The kind of cereal kids eat with cartoons on Saturday mornings. She's scrawled across the nutrition facts like they're just suggestions. She starts with, you don't outgrow, Via. You just get better at walking through it with your knees shaking. Then she adds, almost as an afterthought, and sometimes, you still spill your cereal. She tells the story of a summer in 1987, when she decided at age 54 to learn how to swim. That may not sound dramatic, unless you've ever stood at the edge of a pool, heart pounding like a broken washing machine, telling yourself, I can't do this. Not now, not ever. All my friends said, isn't that a little late in life to start? I said, isn't it a little early to give up? She enrolled in a beginner's class at the community center. Everyone else was either 7 or 70. The instructor was a teenage boy named Chad, who smelled like sunblock and sarcasm. He called me ma'am and tried to show me how to float like I was made of styrofoam. I sank like a grocery list. That summer, something else big happened. The very first GIF was created graphics interchange format, a tiny, looping file that could carry movement through time. Here's what you probably didn't know. The first GIF ever made, an airplane. Not a cat, not a meme, just a little plane, looping through cyberspace like it had somewhere to be. Experts still argue whether the GIF revolutionized communication or just made it more ridiculous. But she sees it differently. The GIF doesn't care if you're tired, it just keeps going. Not because it's strong, but because it's simple. One frame at a time. That's how she learned to swim. Not gracefully, not quickly. One breath, one kick, one bob under the water at a time. And let me tell you, nothing feels more rebellious than learning something new in a body the world told you was too late. She describes the first time she floated on her back. The light above her was blurry, her ears filled with the echo of silence, and for a brief second, she forgot every bad thing she believed about herself. I wasn't a woman. I wasn't a failure. I was just ... buoyant. And just like that, you realize she's not talking about swimming anymore. Then she hits you with this gem. Do you know that sharks have to keep swimming or they die? No pressure or anything. She's kidding kind of, but the metaphor lands. The trick isn't to swim perfectly. It's to keep moving, even when the water is cold, even when the lifeguard looks bored. She says, you don't need to be fearless. You just need to show up in your swimsuit, Evan. If it fits, weird, and say, I'm here to float, damn it. Then she adds, in all caps like she couldn't help herself, and if I drown, at least it'll be in chlorinated water, not regret. You laugh. You picture her standing by the pool, wrapped in a towel that smells like bleach and lemon, grinning like she won a medal just for trying. She ends the note with, you're not too old, or too late, or too broken. You're just one kick away from floating, and underneath that, in the margins. Also, eat the sugary cereal. Life's too short for bran flakes. You fold the cereal box gently. You feel, a little braver, a little sillier, a little more willing to try something ridiculous tomorrow. Because maybe the best way to beat fear isn't to fight it. Maybe it's to laugh, kick your legs, and keep swimming toward whatever GIF version of the future is looping just ahead. This one's written on the back of an old concert ticket, Prince, 1985, Purple Rain Tours. The ink's faded, but you can still see the seat number, row G, seat 14. She's doodled a lightning bolt where the barcode used to be. You know this letter's about to go places. She starts with, you ever notice how the loudest people in the room are usually the least sure of themselves? Then adds, confidence isn't volume, it's quiet certainty, like a cat who knows the sunbeam is for her. She tells you about being 52 and applying for a job she was overqualified for, as the hiring manager put it. He smiled, like he'd just told her a compliment. She smiled back like she wasn't imagining setting his tie on fire. I didn't want to be flattered. I wanted to be taken seriously. She didn't get the job, but she left the interview, bought herself a milkshake, and sat in the park while a kid in a dinosaur hoodie did somersaults in front of her. I figured if the world couldn't see my worth, I'd better see it for myself. That same year, a Soviet pilot named Gennady Strekalov was aboard the space station Salyut 7 when he reported seeing something strange, a glowing orange cloud in space. Not a gas leak, not a reflection, just light, expanding, pulsing. Some experts say it was a natural phenomenon. Others still argue about it, but me, I like to think it was space applauding. She ties it back, because even in the dark, even in places humans weren't meant to be, something recognizes when you show up honest. Then she slips in a fact that feels like a dare. Sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. 6 minutes. Slow and steady isn't lazy, it's efficient. She once gave a presentation to a boardroom full of men who interrupted her 3 times before she got past slide 2. So she unplugged the projector, smiled, and said, if you already know it all, I won't waste your time. And then she left, just walked out. High heels clicking like gunshots on marble. She didn't go back to that company. They called me difficult. I called me done. You feel that in your bones. She talks about how, growing up, she was always told to be nice, stay small, and don't embarrass anyone. But no one mentioned how important it was to embarrass people who deserved it. You're allowed to take up space. And if someone flinches, tell them to blink elsewhere. She's not angry in the letter. She's amused. Amused that it took her 5 decades to figure out she didn't need permission to shine. Then she writes something oddly specific. Did you know the dot over a lowercase I is called a tittle? Yeah, even the smallest part of a sentence has a name, has value. She leaves a gap after that, like she's letting you breathe. Then she says, if they try to convince you you're too loud, too opinionated, too much, remember, they're just too scared of their own quiet. She ends with a whisper, disguised as a roar. You don't need to announce your worth, but you do need to believe it, like Prince in heels, like the sunbeam cat, like that orange cloud that showed up in space with no apology. You hold the ticket stub in your hand. For a second, you almost hear the drums and guitar riffs from 1985. You can see her there, in row G, seat 14, singing along, not caring who watched. She knew the lyrics, but more importantly, she knew herself, and now, maybe, so do you. This one's scribbled on the back of a diner menu, emanated, smudged with syrup, and cracked along the fold. You can still make out the words, bottomless coffee, and 2 eggs, any style. At the top, in her unmistakable hand, routine is where the sacred hides. You blink. That's not exactly the kind of wisdom people put on Pinterest boards. But then again, she's never been much for cliches. She tells the story of the year, 1991. She had just moved into a tiny apartment with mismatched curtains and a bathtub that groaned like it was haunted. Every morning, she'd wake up, make toast, and sit by the window with a chipped mug of instant coffee. Not because I had to, but because I needed something to stand still while the world spun. That same year, something monumental happened. The World Wide Web became publicly available. Most people didn't notice. Just a handful of academics, nerds, and dreamers. People didn't realize they were witnessing the start of forever. What you probably didn't know, the very first website ever made still exists. It's just a page of text. No images, no ads, just purpose. Sometimes what lasts isn't flashy. It's what shows up again and again, without applause. She describes the comfort of rituals, folding towels the same way every Sunday, writing her grocery list on the back of receipts, eating soup on Thursdays. We don't talk enough about the power of predictability, but it's a kind of prayer, really, a small way to say, I'm still here, she says. People mistake chaos for freedom. You don't need a spontaneous skydiving trip to prove you're alive. Sometimes, joy is just a warm bagel and no surprises. She slips in a fact you didn't see coming. Octopuses have 3 hearts, 2 for the gills, 1 for the body, but when they swim, the main heart stops. That's why they prefer to crawl. Then she drops this, even miracles need rest. She talks about how people chase excitement, waiting for the big moments, the engagement, the promotion, the move to Paris, but when you look back, it's the small things that glitter, the toast that popped just right, the song that played when you weren't paying attention, the neighbor's dog that barked every morning like an alarm clock with fur. Rituals aren't ruts, they're railings, and when the wind picks up, you'll be glad you've got something to hold. You imagine her in that creaky apartment, sipping coffee in silence while the world rewrote itself with code and wires. I didn't know the internet was being born. I just knew my eggs were over medium, and that meant everything was okay for 5 minutes. She writes that people underestimate the beauty of the ordinary because they're addicted to the extraordinary. But ordinary is what saves you. It's where the healing hides. And then, tucked under the corner of the menu, in tiny handwriting, make your bed, not for discipline, for ceremony. You smile, because you made your bed today. Maybe not neatly. Maybe the blanket is half off the edge, but it counts. She closes the letter with a toast. To the routines we mocked when we were young, to the repetition we thought was boring, to the quiet cups of coffee that saved our lives without asking for credit. And just like that, the menu becomes holy, a relic of fried eggs and whispered wisdom. You tuck it in your lap, wondering what parts of your day, your life deserve a second glance. Maybe the ordinary isn't the enemy of meaning. Maybe it's the doorway. And maybe tomorrow morning, when you stir your tea or crack your knuckles, you'll hear her voice in your head. That's sacred too. This one's written on the back of an old library card, the kind with the little stamped dates in faded ink, edges curled like they've weathered 10,000 checkouts. She's drawn a tiny magnifying glass in the top corner, and just beneath it, this, you don't find truth, you notice it. She begins with a story from 1962, when she was just a teenager trying to sneak into the adults-only section of the library, not for scandal, but because that's where they kept the good stuff, the philosophy, the psychology, the big questions with no answers. The librarian caught me, of course, but instead of kicking me out, she handed me a book and said, "Don't believe everything you read, especially this." That moment stuck with her. Not just the book, but the permission to question, to dig, to turn pages even if they confused her. In the same year, the first man orbited the Earth, John Glenn, a smooth for hours and 55 minutes of sheer, uncharted human courage. And here's a detail most people don't know. He brought a camera, and what he captured wasn't just the curvature of the Earth, it was the curvature of wonder. She draws a line between that orbit and her own awakening. You don't need a rocket to explore. Just a quiet room and a question no one's answered properly yet. She once spent an entire summer trying to understand the meaning of enough. What's enough money? Enough love? Enough time? She never found a solid answer, but she did learn how to make peace with the asking. Sometimes truth doesn't roar. It sighs. She slips in a fun fact, almost like a wink. Bananas are berries, but strawberries aren't. Then she pauses and adds, That's what truth is like. It doesn't always make sense, but it's still true. She describes a conversation she had with a man at a bus stop in 1978. He was humming an Elvis song, wearing one sock, and offered her a mint. She asked him why he looked so happy, and he said, "Because this is the only moment I'm sure of, so I'm soaking it." She never saw him again, but she's quoted him ever since. We search for meaning like it's hiding behind a locked door, but half the time, it's right there on the sidewalk, whistling off-key. Experts still argue whether truth is relative or absolute. She's not here to solve that debate. She just wants you to know, you can be right and still not be kind, and you can be lost and still be wise. She writes about the time she admitted she didn't love the person everyone expected her to marry. It felt like betrayal, until it started to feel like liberation. Telling the truth sometimes feels like punching a mirror, but when the pieces settle, you can finally see yourself clearly. There's something tender about the way she phrases things. She's not trying to convince you, she's just opening a door and inviting you to peek through. Then she shares one last, little-known gem. The world's shortest war was between Britain and Zanzibar in 1896. It lasted 38 minutes. Proves that some conflicts don't need to drag on. That line sits there for a moment, echoing. Not everything needs a battle. Some truths just want to be seen, not defended. She ends the library card with this. Ask more questions, especially the ones that make you squirm, especially the ones with no answers. That's where the truth lives, in the space between. And then, in slanted script, like she's whispering, just for you, you don't have to figure it all out tonight. Just be willing to notice. You close the imaginary book in your hands, a little more curious, a little more open. The kind of open that doesn't need certainty to feel full. And maybe that's the real lesson here. You don't chase truth. You sit still enough for it to find you. This one's scribbled across the back of a grocery list: apples, bread, toothpaste, and something crossed out so hard you can't even guess what it was. But tucked beneath the ordinary, in that looping, careful handwriting, sometimes, the bravest thing you'll do is stay. She starts off light, talking about the time she almost moved to another city on a whim. She'd packed 2 suitcases, cancelled her magazine subscriptions, and even printed directions to a rental she never saw in person. But the morning of the move, she sat down on her porch with a bowl of cereal and just stayed. I don't know why, I just didn't go. And that non-decision turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. She isn't against leaving, she's just making space for a different kind of courage. The kind that shows up when you resist the urge to escape. People glamorize quitting your job, ending the relationship, buying a van, and finding yourself. But you know what's harder? Choosing to find yourself where you already are. Then she drops a curveball. In 1958, a woman named Hula Hoop Sally twirled a hoop for 74 hours straight. No break, no nap, just spinning and spinning. And she asks, with a smile in the ink, "What are you spinning that long for? And is it still worth it?" That one lands heavy. She talks about a period in her life when everything felt still. New romance, no big wins, just early nights and leftovers and weather reports. At first, she thought it was a rut. But over time, she realized, stillness is not stagnation. It's restoration in disguise. She weaves in this strange fact. Sharks can't stop swimming or they'll suffocate. But humans, we need the still water, the quiet pond, the nap on a rainy Tuesday. She admits she used to be addicted to change. New haircuts, new routines, new crushes. It made her feel like she was evolving, but mostly, she was just avoiding sitting still long enough to hear her own thoughts. Motion can be a mask. Stillness is where the honesty seeps in. There's a story about a cracked teacup she kept for years. It didn't match anything. It leaked a little, but it was her favorite. Because it reminded me that being useful isn't the same as being perfect. She pauses in the letter, then writes, "You don't always have to go somewhere to arrive." Experts still debate whether the act of staying put is linked to emotional resilience or simply comfort zones. She says, maybe it's both. Maybe staying is hard precisely because it looks so easy. Don't confuse stillness for weakness. Mountains don't move, and they're doing just fine. And just as you're sinking into that image, she slips in a little gem. Sea otters hold hands when they sleep so they don't drift apart. She lets that settle. Maybe staying, really staying, is just the decision to hold hands through the night, even when everything feels like it might float away. She tells you to notice the parts of your life that haven't changed, and ask whether that's a problem or a gift. You're allowed to love something that doesn't impress anyone else. You're allowed to be a slow burn in a world obsessed with fireworks. Then she circles back to that grocery list. How she used to keep the old ones in a drawer, because every item was proof of care. A tomato was more than a tomato wit, meant she planned to feed herself. That she was here. Staying doesn't mean settling. It means claiming your place in the world like it matters, because it does. And finally, at the bottom corner, written upside down like a secret, don't underestimate the quiet seasons. That's when the roots grow. You lean back, the spinning slows. You feel, maybe for the first time in a while, that you don't need to be anywhere but here. Not changing everything. Not starting over. Just staying. This last one isn't written on paper at all. It's whispered in the steam rising from a mug of tea. It's the kind of message that doesn't need ink, just warmth, breath, and a listener who's made it this far. You made it, and no one claps for that, but they should. She begins gently now, slower than before, like walking barefoot on creaky floorboards. She tells you that old age doesn't come with a warning bell or an arrival stamp. One day you just wake up, and your knees sound like bubble wrap when you stand. And somehow, even with all that noise, the world gets quieter. She recalls the moment she turned 92. No cake, no party, just a folded blanket, a letter from her niece, and the sudden realization that she'd outlived everyone who once told her who she was supposed to be. There's freedom in that, in finally becoming a stranger to your own expectations. She brings up a strange piece of trivia. Wombat poop is cube-shaped, perfect little squares. Scientists still don't fully agree on why. She chuckles in the margin, writing, even your messes don't have to make sense to be valid. And then, like a breeze through a dusty attic, she exhales this. You don't get to take any of it with you. Not the stuff, not the arguments, not the likes or the trophies. All you carry is the way you made people feel and how you let them make you feel. There's a softness in her tone now, like she's folding the last page instead of writing it. She says, some nights, she sits by the window and watches the stars with the kind of reverence people usually save for religion. And on those nights, she doesn't wish for more time. She just whispers, thank you for letting me stay this long. Experts still argue about what matters most in the end. Is it relationships? Accomplishments? Peace of mind? She says maybe it's all of that or none of it. Maybe it's just how gently you held the world when no one was watching. She reminds you of something small you might have forgotten. The exact sound of laughter when you aren't holding back. The way your toes curl when a memory hits just right. How you once looked at someone and felt like the whole room turned gold. Those moments are the real inheritance. She doesn't need to convince you of anything anymore. Not now. Not here. Just one final story. I once knew a man who planted a tree and never lived to see it bloom. When I asked him why, he said, because someone will. That's legacy. Not what you build, but what you begin. And then, beneath the invisible ink of everything she's ever taught you, one final whisper. You've already started more than you know. You feel the weight of all 15 notes now. Grocery lists, diner menus, library, cards, all telling you the same truth in different flavors, that life isn't something you chase. It's something you notice, nourish, and eventually let go. You don't need more. You just need real. And in the final seconds, she leans in one last time, her voice barely there. Close your eyes. The stars will still be here when you wake up. Now, the light dims. The hum of the fan in the corner feels like an ocean tide. The chair you're in cradles you like it knows you're tired in a very old way. The story is done, but it never really ends. It just folds itself into the next quiet moment. Maybe tomorrow morning, you'll stir your coffee a little slower. Let the toast burn just slightly on one side. Smile at the neighbor you usually ignore. Or maybe, you'll just rest, and that'll be more than enough. The world isn't asking you to be perfect, just present, so breathe, friend. Let the silence be enough now. Let the warmth of it carry you gently out of this day. Let yourself go.